You're good.
Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee for today, December 10th. I'll also note this is the last Community Development Committee meeting of this four-year cycle. We have a relatively short agenda, including 2 public hearing items and a couple of discussion items. So I'm going to actually move the consent agenda, items 4 through 10. They include our ESG service funding recommendations, an agreement with MFIP and Hennepin County, a number of changes in the financial terms for projects at Sewer Towers East, PPL, DEC, and Ann's Elliott Park portfolio, approving the resolution with regard to tax forfeited land, and making a few minor changes to the Target Center Arena Design Group. Are there any items 4 through 10 that anyone would like to pull off of committee to discuss? Seeing none on the consent agenda, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. I want to note we've been joined by council members Lilligren, Quincy, Reich, and Gordon, a quorum of this committee, as well as council members Schiff and Council President Johnson. I want to thank you both for being here this morning. We do have a number of important items on the agenda. We'll move on to the first item, which is item number 1. This is an extension of a lease to continue with Gold Medal Park. Emily, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. I'm Emily Stern with CPED Business Development. Before you today is a public hearing on a proposed lease extension of the city-owned portion of Gold Medal Park. In 2006, the city entered into a 10-year lease agreement with a privately funded nonprofit park development foundation to construct, operate, and maintain the city-owned portion of Gold Medal Park. The Guthrie Theater Foundation entered into a parallel lease agreement with the Park Development Foundation for the portion of Gold Medal Park that is owned by the Guthrie. This action today recommends that the city's current lease with the Park Development Foundation for the city-owned portion of the park be amended to extend the term 50 years in order to preserve the park as public green space and a neighborhood amenity for the long term. The Park Development Foundation has agreed to continue to fund operations and maintenance of the park to its current standard over the extended lease term at an estimated cost of approximately $150,000 per year in exchange for the elimination of its annual $50,000 rent payment to the city per the current lease. The Park Development Foundation is currently in active discussions with the Guthrie Theater Foundation about purchasing the majority of the Guthrie-owned portion of Gold Medal Park. The Park Development Foundation proposes to privately fund, operate, and maintain both the city and the Guthrie parcels under a unified management structure for the entire park. To facilitate this transaction, staff recommends approval of the continued park space use for the Guthrie parcel and a waiver of the city's one-time option to reacquire that portion of the property in accordance with the city's redevelopment contract for the larger Guthrie Theater complex. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Ms. Stern? Nope, seeing none. This is a public hearing on item number 1. Ms. Stern, can you just note what our normal process would be to approve a sale like this, and if all of the boxes have been checked?
Yes, correct. So this is, even though this is a long-term lease, it is akin to a land sale. So we have gotten public City Planning Commission approval and findings of consistency with the comprehensive plan, which is the key piece in the process.
And with regard to notification, the neighborhoods were notified? The
neighborhood has been notified, and there was a public meeting held with the Mill District Neighborhood Association.
And with regard to the adjacent property owners, the Guthrie and the condo buildings, were they also notified?
They were also notified, correct.
So is there anything in this that would be out of the ordinary with regard to how a land sale or a long-term lease would be handled?
No, there's not.
Okay. This is a public hearing on item number 1. Anyone who's here to speak to it, I understand Mr. Larson, Ms. Kittock, Mr. Collison, and Ms. Rainier are here. Others who are here are welcome to speak. Please step forward and state your name and address for the record.
My name's Eric Larson. I live in the Mill District. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. The CPED report on the Gold Medal Park lease amendment contains misinformation. The city's process in seeking this lease amendment lacks transparency and meaningful opportunity for genuine citizen input. As a result, the committee and the council should not support this proposal today, but delay further action until the real questions about the proposal are answered. The only notification that I, as a neighbor, received of today's hearing was from a partisan neighborhood publication. Unlike, say, licensing procedures, there was no city notice to residents. Furthermore, the CPED report notwithstanding, the Mill District Neighborhood Association did not have a public discussion or deliberation about supporting this proposal. Rather, the association had an information session in which the chair, Councilmember Goodman, and Dr. McGuire made a presentation. That presentation left me, as an attendee, with the impression that the council member and Dr. McGuire had worked out an agreement for revising the lease, perhaps without much consultation of outside stakeholders. The session was short on actual details of the agreement. Attendees were not given information about what the content of the agreement was in advance, and there was no discussion of alternatives. Yesterday, I discussed with the CPED staff member who wrote the report, or I exchanged phone messages with the CPED staff member who wrote the report. The call that she returned to me, the message, included information consistent with my characterization of the meeting. The staff member stated that contrary to the indicative language in the report, there was not an official vote of support. Rather, the report relied on a characterization of the meeting as having a positive tenor and supportive reaction without explaining the source of that information. The staff member referred me to Councilmember Goodman if I have further questions, suggesting that the council member herself may have been the source of that characterization, but I don't know. I was unable to reach the staff member this morning when I attempted to return her call again. I was at that Mill District meeting, as I said. During the information session, attendees raised questions about the proposal that were not sufficiently addressed. Indeed, similar concerns about the amendment were raised at last month's Mill District Neighborhood Association meeting by more people than who had raised the questions at the initial meeting. This lack of a transparent process is merely one reason to question the agreement. Equally important is that the proponents of the amendment have made questionable claims and that the city and public will face negative consequences if the lease is structured in the terms outlined in the proposal. Proponents claim that the cost for operating the park is $150,000 per year. Reviewing the most recently available Park Development Foundation 990 reports reveals that in 2010 and 2011, the average expense was about 20% lower than the claimed amount. Including in those expenses are amounts payable to LAC Enterprises, the Minneapolis Finance Department, which I presume is for water expense, Western Mutual Insurance, something that is needed because a private foundation is operating the park, and small amounts to Excel and CenturyLink for utilities. By far the largest expense is the payment to LAC Enterprises, which increased from $83,000 in 2010 to $96,000 in 2011, a 15% increase in costs. We need to know more about the relationship between the individuals behind the foundation and LAC. LAC's website, which does business as Windsor Companies, features the Gold Medal Park information on the site, but also notes awards that it has won for other projects, including one at a McGuire residence in Orono, a McGuire residence in Wayzata, and at United Health. It may well be that these projects preceded the development of Gold Medal Park. It could even be that due to a previous relationship, LAC gave the foundation a discount for volume business that was not passed on to any landscape work at any private residence. But we have no information on this process or decision-making because the Park Development Foundation is controlled by a 3-person board, all related to one another. If the proposal goes through, for the next 50 years, an unelected, unaccountable, private foundation will control what happens in the park. Neighborhood residents in the city will not have effective means to ensure that Gold Medal Park operates in accordance with the best interests of the neighborhood and the city. Further, as a private park on public land, Gold Medal Park would be able to operate as if it were part of a private gated community. When a group like Twin Cities Pride wants to use Loring Park for a festival, or an Ultimate League wants to use Minnehaha Park for a competition, city regulations for access and permits apply. The process is transparent. These regulations and processes are governed in part by the First Amendment, which limits the government's ability to restrict public access to public parklands based on the content of a group's message. But the First Amendment does not apply to land under lease by a private party, like the Park Development Foundation. So if, for the next 50 years, Gold Medal Park is leased and operated by a private foundation, that foundation would have discretion to make whatever rules it wants, even if those rules involve content-based restriction on who can use the park or what types of activities park users can engage in. Those rules are great when we're talking about our own
Mr. Larson,
backyards.
could you sum it up? We've given you 5 minutes.
This is the first time we've had a chance to speak on it. I will sum
I'm just
it up.
asking you respectfully if you could sum it up.
Yes, I have 3 points left to make. They're great when we're talking about our own backyard, but Gold Medal Park is a shared public space. It should be treated as such. If the city agrees to the lease extension, the people will have no way to hold accountable how the park is operated. Similarly, the Park Development Foundation has the sole ability to determine the activities it allows in the park and how and when to enforce the rules. Even if it has clear policies, it has discretion to determine how to enforce those policies. Under the proposed lease amendment, the City of Minneapolis would, in essence, be giving away the value of citizens' involvement and public accountability to reduce the cost to a donor who has control over the park. Yet the entity that will sign the lease, the Park Development Foundation, at the end of the last financial year, for which we have records, had $12,723 of net assets. It relies on ongoing donations, a fact that came out during the neighborhood association meeting in the context of Dr. McGuire noting that neighbors would be asked to contribute to the cost of the park in the future. Not quite taxation, but without representation, but still a poor arrangement. Proponents of this amendment will tell you scare stories that without it, the park will not exist. The claim is simply not true. There are 2.5 years left on the lease. There's no need to rush to judgment now. Such a plan, unlike the proposal in front of us now, should be developed in the open with full disclosure to benefit the city of Minneapolis, the neighbors, and reflect our input. By foregoing $50,000 per year lease income or saving $100,000 in operating costs, we are undermining the opportunity for genuine citizen involvement in the future of Gold Medal Park, a cost not worth giving up control of this land for a half century.
Thank you for your testimony. The next person on the list is Claudia Kittok. The next person on the list is Dan Collison. Okay, they all say number 1 next to them.
Yeah,
so-
Madam Chair, I'm sorry if I signed on the wrong list. I am
Okay.
here to speak to the Ryan proposal.
How about this? Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Mr. Borger.
John Borger, resident of the Mill District. I just want to take this opportunity to express my appreciation to Dr. McGuire and to Councilmember Goodman for their leadership in getting this arrangement to the point that it is now. I've spoken with a lot of fellow neighbors around the park. I've seen what goes on in the park. The park has been run in an appropriate manner for the past 8 years or so, and there's no indication that it would be run in any different manner moving forward. This is a tremendous public asset and amenity, and I think it is in the interests of everyone to have this uncertainty about the 10-year lease resolved sooner rather than later, and I encourage approval of this particular proposal.
Thank you. Mr. McGuire, welcome.
Thank you, Councilman Goodman and other people. I did not come intending to speak, but I think in light of the first presentation by Mr. Larson, it is at least appropriate that I set the facts straight for you all so you understand it and there's no misconceptions. Park Development Foundation is a not-for-profit, appropriately organized entity that has been largely, vast majority, well in excess of 95%, funded by myself and my family members. The funds to date into Gold Medal Park are somewhere between $8 and $10 million. That was done solely for the public good. There are no relationships between that entity or any other party that are less than arm's length, including with Windsor Companies, who has maintained the park from the beginning and was involved, along with Krauss Anderson, in its original construction. I think the work that Windsor Company has done and the facility that has been provided to the public will speak for itself, both in terms of the quality of the park, the maintenance of the park, and the use of that park, which at no time has ever been closed or limited to any individual that I am aware of. Perhaps one could argue with the fact that we have not allowed people to purchase or rent space in the park because we are unprepared to have segments of the park, such as the peak of the mound for weddings and stuff, which would limit it to the general public. We have been very attentive to open access and intend to maintain that. The future structure of the park and the Park Development Foundation will be changed in the manner of adding people to the board or to the trustees of that entity, and it will indeed be arranging to seek funds from everyone who is involved in both Gold Medal Park maintenance and perhaps other maintenance opportunities where we could be of benefit. And some of those fundings have been secured. It is absolutely true that the foundation's dollars fluctuate because there has been no particular need to throw and maintain a lot of money into it, but it pays its bills regularly. And I think those are the principal things. So hopefully I will not act offended by any of the sideways comments, but I will tell you and stand before you and say this is a straight up issue. Maintenance going up or down 15% reflects things like in some years 10 trees die, and if you go and bring in 9-inch trees or 12-inch trees at several $1,000s, you see more maintenance. Some years water is less, some years water is more. Some years we fertilize with organic fertilizer 4 times a year instead of 3. One year Japanese beetles came in and eradicated large portions, as you may have noticed, and we took those out and replaced that sod immediately. Several occasions post-Vikings game celebrations have resulted in signage being destroyed, and it has to be replaced. So these are all obvious and apparent. Lastly, I would say that there is a timing issue here. This has been a complex set of negotiations and issues. They have not been private negotiations between me and Councilwoman Goodman or anyone else. In fact, we have met with the mayor, various city people, Guthrie people, for several years in anticipation in this. And at this point, a set of factors are coming together that make this the appropriate time to extend this far into the future for the good of the city as a whole and all of the people that want to come here. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and I will move approval myself. Let there be no misinformation out there that this is something I'm extremely proud of doing. It's something that I put my blood, sweat, and tears in for 10 years. This could have been a gigantic surface parking lot, as it was when I first got my hands on it, when it came into my ward 10 years ago. The deal to do a short-term lease was one in which we had someone coming forward to do something that no other private sector person or public entity was willing to do, including the park board or any of the people, quite frankly, who live along there, most of whom haven't donated a penny to make this happen. We did have a fairly nervous meeting with some of the neighbors in this area about 5 years ago, and I was directed by about 12 of them to try to figure out something prior to the end of my term representing this area, and that has been part of the push of the timeline. In addition to that, there's been such amazing development surrounding this area that the city has felt that the $50,000 lease fee was no longer necessary. That was put into place because we weren't sure if there would actually be development surrounding the park, and we wanted to make sure that there wouldn't be a loss of tax base. There's actually been a tremendous multi-million-dollar growth of tax base as a result of the park being in this location. So if someone else had stepped forward and said they would raise all of the money to build this park, raise all the money to maintain the park, not have it cost a penny to the park board or the city of Minneapolis, I would have been thrilled to have that happen. The leadership, I've never heard anything negative about the use of the park other than those who are mad that we won't sell it to them for a private event, which Dr. McGuire has been loath to do over time. So I'm very proud of the work that's happened on this. I'm really happy for my constituents who I won't be representing anymore, who have watched over this park, picked up garbage in this park, and been very supportive of making sure that this remain one piece of a very big lack of green space downtown. So with that, I would hope that everyone would agree that this should be a moment to celebrate, and it's unfortunate, I guess, with no good deed goes unpunished, and there's not going to be unanimity on anything, and I think that's unfortunate. Any other comments, questions on the motion to approve? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll now move on to item number 2. Mr. McGuire, thank you for being here today.